Listen, if you thought the reality TV streets were quiet, think again. Because tonight, the tea is scorching, the alliances are cracking, and fans are absolutely shocked. What started as a side comment spiraled into a full-blown drag session when Tasha K turned her spotlight straight onto Rasheeda Frost, and baby, she did not come to play. Emotions ran high as old wounds were ripped open, loyalty was questioned, and one name kept echoing through the chaos: Yandy Smith. Fans woke up confused, timelines were on fire, and suddenly everyone was asking the same thing: is Rasheeda really who she claims to be? Or has she been playing both sides this whole time? According to Tasha K, what Rasheeda did behind closed doors, especially how she allegedly handled Yandy, was the final straw. And when Tasha feels crossed, she unloads receipts, stories, and accusations so wild that even her own supporters had to pause and rewind. Sources close to the situation say this isn't just messy gossip, this is personal. Friendships were tested, the family was left divided, and the internet wasted no time picking sides. One minute Rasheeda is the calm, classy boss, the next minute she's being labeled, "ain't real," by one of the loudest voices in entertainment commentary. And Yandy? Her silence only made the storm louder. So buckle up, because what you're about to hear involves secret conversations, alleged betrayals, and a confrontation that fans did not see coming. This story has layers, and every layer gets messier than the last. The moment Tasha K went live, you could feel it shift. Not just tea spilling, but something deeper, something personal. Fans were shocked because this wasn't a casual drag, this was targeted. Tasha leaned into the camera, eyes sharp, voice calm in that dangerous way, and said Rasheeda ain't real. Not fake in the internet way. Fake in the loyalty way. Fake in the friend way. And once those words landed, there was no pulling them back. According to Tasha, this all traces back to a private situation involving Yandy, a conversation that was never meant to leave a tight inner circle. Tasha claimed Rasheeda sat in rooms smiling, nodding, acting supportive, while quietly moving information in a way that protected her brand and left Yandy exposed. Tasha said she watched it happen, heard it happen, and what bothered her most wasn't the move itself, but how calculated it was. She said Rasheeda knows how to look clean while letting other people take the fall. Fans immediately started connecting dots. Old interviews, old scenes, moments that felt off but were ignored at the time. Emotions ran high online as people replayed clips where Rasheeda preached loyalty and sisterhood. Tasha mocked that image, saying, "That's not who she is when the camera is cut off." She claimed Rasheeda plays neutral only when it benefits her, and when Yandy needed public support the most, Rasheeda allegedly chose silence and distance. Tasha then dropped the first twist. She said Yandy reached out privately, confused and hurt, asking why Rasheeda suddenly switched energy. According to Tasha, Yandy felt blindsided. One minute they were aligned, the next minute doors were closed, calls unanswered, and narratives changing. Tasha said Yandy wasn't even angry at first, just disappointed. And disappointment, she said, cuts deeper than rage. The story took a darker turn when Tasha described a behind-the-scenes meetup. She claimed Rasheeda attended an industry gathering where Yandy's name came up, and instead of defending her, Rasheeda allegedly let others speak negatively without checking them. Tasha said that silence was loud. She said Rasheeda knew exactly what she was doing, allowing the room to form a narrative while keeping her hands clean. Fans were shocked hearing this because it painted Rasheeda not as a victim of circumstances, but as someone who mastered survival in reality TV. Then came the family angle. Tasha claimed Rasheeda's inner circle warned her to stay out of Yandy's mess, to protect the brand, the marriage image, the businesses. And according to Tasha, Rasheeda listened. The family was left divided, not publicly, but privately, with some people feeling Rasheeda crossed an unspoken line. Tasha said when business comes before friendship, somebody always gets hurt, and in this case, it was Yandy. Tasha didn't stop there. She reenacted a phone call, lowering her voice, mimicking Rasheeda's calm tone. She claimed Rasheeda said something along the lines of, "I can't afford to be attached to this right now." That sentence alone sent fans into a frenzy. Emotions ran high because many felt that was a betrayal dressed up as maturity. Tasha argued that real friends don't disappear when things get messy, especially when they helped create the environment in the first place. As the live continued, Tasha turned directly to the audience and said this was why she never bought Rasheeda's image. She said Rasheeda is polished, strategic, and always thinking 3 moves ahead. She made it clear this wasn't about jealousy or clout, but about patterns. She claimed Yandy wasn't the first person to feel this slow fade from Rasheeda, just the most visible. Fans began picking sides in real time. Some defended Rasheeda, saying staying neutral is smart. Others said neutrality is just another form of betrayal. The chat exploded when Tasha hinted she had receipts. Not screenshots yet, but timelines, witnesses, people who were in those rooms. She said if pushed, she would speak names, dates, and motives. That threat alone changed the temperature of the conversation. Toward the end of this stretch, Tasha's tone softened, but the message stayed sharp. She said Yandy learned the hard way that everyone smiling in your face isn't standing with you. She said Rasheeda didn't scream, didn't argue, didn't go public, and that's what made it worse. According to Tasha, the quiet moves are the ones that do the most damage. And just when fans thought that was the full story, Tasha leaned back, paused, and said there's more. She said the real reason this situation hurt so bad had nothing to do with cameras or blogs, but with a promise Rasheeda allegedly made to Yandy long before the drama ever hit the internet. And that promise, she said, is where everything truly fell apart. That promise, according to Tasha, was made during a quiet moment when no cameras were rolling and no producers were whispering in anyone's ear. She said Yandy confided fears about how quickly public opinion can flip, how one wrong narrative can stain a reputation forever. Tasha claimed Rasheeda looked her dead in the eye and promised, no matter what happens, I won't let them paint you crazy or careless. And that's why, Tasha said, the silence hurt more than any public diss ever could. Tasha told viewers that when the controversy finally exploded online, Yandy waited. She waited for a text. Waited for a call. Waited for some kind of signal that Rasheeda was still standing with her. Emotions ran high because none of that came. Instead, Rasheeda allegedly started moving differently. Liking neutral posts. Showing up smiling at unrelated events. Acting untouched by the storm that was swallowing someone she once called family. Fans were shocked when Tasha claimed Yandy finally broke and confronted Rasheeda privately. Not with yelling, not with accusations, but with one simple question. Why did you leave me hanging? Tasha said Rasheeda responded calmly, almost coldly, explaining that she had to think about longevity, about protecting her household, about not attaching herself to anything that could backfire. Tasha said that answer confirmed everything Yandy feared. The friendship had limits, and those limits were defined by optics. Things escalated when mutual friends got involved. Tasha claimed people started choosing sides quietly, not online but in group chats and private conversations. Some defended Rasheeda, saying she did what any smart woman would do. Others felt she crossed a moral line. The family was left divided because what started as industry drama turned into a question of character. Who do you protect when things go left, your image or your people? Tasha revealed another twist that sent the internet spiraling. She said Rasheeda allegedly gave advice behind the scenes that contradicted what she told Yandy directly. According to Tasha, Rasheeda warned others to distance themselves, saying the situation was about to get ugly. That warning, Tasha said, sealed Yandy's isolation. Doors that were once open quietly closed, invitations stopped coming, and the energy shifted overnight. Fans were shocked because this painted Rasheeda as a quiet orchestrator rather than a bystander. Tasha emphasized that Rasheeda never had to say anything publicly. Her influence did the work for her. Emotions ran high as viewers debated whether that level of influence comes with responsibility. Tasha argued that when you have power in a space, silence is still a choice. Then came the moment Tasha said changed everything. She claimed Yandy finally spoke up for herself in a private setting, expressing hurt and confusion. Tasha said Rasheeda responded by accusing Yandy of expecting too much, of blurring the lines between business and friendship. That accusation cut deep. Tasha said Yandy felt like she was being rewritten as the problem for wanting loyalty. The narrative didn't stop there. Tasha claimed Rasheeda later expressed frustration that Yandy's situation was even being associated with her name. That comment, Tasha said, traveled fast. Once Yandy heard it, whatever hope she had left evaporated. Fans were shocked because this wasn't loud betrayal, it was surgical. Clean, controlled, devastating. As word spread, reactions poured in. Some fans defended Rasheeda fiercely, praising her for staying unbothered and unentangled. Others dragged her for what they called selective sisterhood. Emotions ran high on social media as old moments were re-examined. Clips where Rasheeda spoke about standing 10 toes down were reposted with side-eye captions. People questioned whether those words ever applied when real risk was involved. Tasha added fuel by revealing that this wasn't the first time Rasheeda allegedly distanced herself when controversy hit close. She hinted at other situations where Rasheeda quietly stepped back while others took public heat. Tasha said the pattern was clear if you were willing to look. Survive at all costs, even if it means letting relationships burn. The tension deepened when Tasha described how Yandy internalized the situation. She said Yandy blamed herself at first, wondering if she had overestimated the bond. That self-doubt, Tasha said, was the cruelest outcome. Not the blogs, not the rumors, but the realization that someone she trusted saw her as a liability. Fans were shocked hearing how far the emotional fallout went. Tasha claimed Yandy stopped confiding in people, pulled back socially, and questioned her instincts. The family was left divided emotionally, with some urging Yandy to confront Rasheeda publicly, and others telling her to let it go and move on quietly. That inner conflict weighed heavy. Then came another unexpected twist. Tasha claimed Rasheeda allegedly reached out weeks later, not to apologize but to smooth things over for appearances. A check-in, a vague message about wishing peace and growth. Tasha said Yandy saw right through it. To her, it felt like damage control, not accountability. Emotions ran high because that message confirmed the distance was intentional, not accidental. Tasha told viewers that Yandy never responded. Not out of spite, but out of clarity. Sometimes silence is the only boundary left. Fans were shocked by that revelation, seeing it as Yandy finally reclaiming control of her narrative. But Tasha warned that silence doesn't erase hurt, it just hides it. As the story continued to circulate, industry whispers grew louder. Tasha claimed people started questioning Rasheeda's authenticity behind closed doors. Not publicly, but enough for her to feel it. According to Tasha, that's when Rasheeda allegedly grew defensive, insisting she owed nobody loyalty beyond her household. That stance, Tasha said, only widened the divide. Emotions ran high when Tasha turned reflective. She said this situation exposed a bigger truth about reality TV friendships. Alliances are conditional. Loyalty has an expiration date. And when the cameras stop rolling, the real priorities show. Fans were shocked because many saw themselves in Yandy's position, realizing how often people disappear when things get uncomfortable. Tasha ended this stretch by saying the story still wasn't over. She hinted that unresolved feelings were simmering beneath the surface. Words left unsaid, apologies never given, and choices that might come back around when the tables turn. She warned that when roles reverse, people remember who stood with them and who stepped away. And just as viewers thought the emotional peak had passed, Tasha leaned forward and said the next chapter involves a moment where Rasheeda's carefully protected image would be tested publicly, not by Yandy, but by someone neither of them expected. And when that happens, she said, the past will come knocking whether Rasheeda is ready or not. That unexpected person, according to Tasha, wasn't a blogger, wasn't a producer, and definitely wasn't a fan. It was someone from Rasheeda's own extended circle, someone who had watched everything unfold quietly and finally decided they were tired of pretending nothing happened. Tasha said this person had receipts, not screenshots but experiences. Real moments. Conversations they could repeat word for word. And once that person started talking, the narrative Rasheeda relied on began to crack. Tasha claimed the shift started subtle. Whispers at first. People asking careful questions. Why did Rasheeda really back away? Why did her story never fully line up? Emotions ran high because for the first time, Rasheeda wasn't being protected by silence. According to Tasha, this person didn't attack her publicly, but they didn't defend her either, and that lack of defense spoke volumes in rooms that mattered. Fans were shocked when Tasha said Rasheeda noticed the change immediately. Invitations slowed. Conversations felt colder. Energy that once felt warm turned transactional. Tasha claimed Rasheeda began asking around, trying to figure out who was talking and what was being said. Paranoia crept in, not because the rumors were loud, but because they were quiet and consistent. Then came another twist. Tasha said Yandy was aware of this shift but chose not to engage. She wasn't celebrating it. She wasn't pushing it. She simply observed. Tasha said that restraint showed growth but also exhaustion. Yandy, according to Tasha, was done trying to convince people of her worth. If the truth surfaced, it would do so on its own. The tension escalated when Tasha described a private confrontation that allegedly took place between Rasheeda and the person who broke the silence. No yelling, no cameras, just a direct question. Why did you do her like that? Tasha said Rasheeda didn't deny distancing herself. Instead, she justified it. She said she had to protect her peace, her family, her brand. That explanation, Tasha claimed, only deepened the disappointment in the room. Emotions ran high because this wasn't about business anymore. It was about integrity. Tasha said the person responded by telling Rasheeda that survival without loyalty leaves you standing alone eventually. Fans were shocked hearing this exchange because it suggested Rasheeda was finally being confronted with the emotional cost of her choices. As word of that confrontation spread quietly, the family was left divided even further. Some people doubled down on supporting Rasheeda, insisting she owed nobody explanations. Others started re-evaluating their closeness to her. Tasha said the atmosphere shifted from admiration to caution. People smiled, but trust was thinner. Another dramatic twist came when Tasha claimed Rasheeda attempted to control the narrative by being extra visible. More appearances, more positivity, more inspirational messages. Fans were shocked because what once felt authentic now felt strategic. Emotions ran high as viewers debated whether Rasheeda was genuinely unbothered or scrambling to maintain an image. Tasha said Yandy noticed this too. According to her, Yandy felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. Sadness that things had gone this far. Relief that she no longer felt crazy for sensing something was off all along. That emotional clarity, Tasha said, was healing, even if the situation itself was painful. Then came the moment everyone was waiting for. Tasha claimed Rasheeda finally acknowledged the situation publicly, indirectly. Not names, not details, just a vague statement about protecting energy and choosing self. Fans were shocked by how carefully worded it was. Emotions ran high because many felt it was a missed opportunity for accountability. Tasha didn't let that slide. She broke down the statement line by line, accusing Rasheeda of rewriting history. She said protecting yourself doesn't require abandoning people. She said choosing peace doesn't mean avoiding hard conversations. And she said real growth comes with ownership, not avoidance. The reaction was immediate. Fans flooded comment sections, dragging up old moments, old promises, old words. The family was left divided online now, not just behind the scenes. Some people demanded Yandy respond. Others begged her not to. Emotions ran high as Yandy stayed silent, refusing to be pulled back into chaos. Tasha revealed that silence frustrated Rasheeda more than any response could have. According to her, Rasheeda expected Yandy to lash out, to validate the narrative that Yandy was emotional or unstable. When that didn't happen, it left Rasheeda with nothing to deflect onto. Fans were shocked because silence became the loudest move of all. As weeks passed, Tasha claimed the distance between them became permanent. No reconciliation, no closure conversation, just acceptance. Yandy moved forward quietly, focusing on her circle, her work, her healing. Rasheeda continued forward too, but with a subtle shift in how people perceived her. Not cancelled, not dragged into oblivion, just seen differently. Emotions ran high when Tasha reflected on that outcome. She said sometimes consequences aren't dramatic explosions. Sometimes they're quiet re-evaluations. People still smile at you, but they don't lean in the same way. They don't trust as freely. And that, she said, is the price of calculated loyalty. Tasha ended this portion of the story by saying the chapter between Rasheeda and Yandy may be closed, but the lesson is still unfolding. Alliances in this industry are fragile. Promises are easy when things are calm. But when pressure hits, true character shows. Fans were shocked by how relatable the situation felt, seeing their own experiences reflected in the drama. And just when it seemed like everything had settled into an uneasy quiet, Tasha hinted at one last unresolved piece. A message that was never sent. Words Yandy wrote but deleted. And if those words ever come out, she said, the entire story could shift again. Because some truths, once spoken, change how everyone remembers what really happened. Those unsent words, Tasha said, sat heavy for a long time. Yandy typed them late at night, deleted them in the morning, rewrote them again and again. Not angry words, but honest ones. Tasha claimed Yandy wanted to explain how the silence felt louder than betrayal, how the switch-up made her question every memory they shared. But every time she hovered over send, she stopped herself. Because once words are released, you can't pull them back, and Yandy wasn't sure she wanted to reopen a wound that was finally starting to scar. Tasha said that restraint was mistaken for weakness by some people in Rasheeda's circle. Whispers started that Yandy was scared to speak, that she had something to hide. Fans were shocked hearing this because from the outside, Yandy looked calm, unbothered, focused. But according to Tasha, that calm was hard-earned. Emotions ran high internally, even if they didn't spill online. Then came another twist that reignited everything. Tasha claimed a mutual acquaintance casually mentioned Yandy's name around Rasheeda, joking that Yandy had handled it with grace. That comment, Tasha said, hit a nerve. Rasheeda allegedly snapped back, saying grace doesn't equal innocence. That sentence alone shifted the room. The family was left divided again, because some felt that comment was unnecessary, even cruel. Word of that remark made its way back to Yandy. Not directly, but through layers, softened and sharpened at the same time. Tasha said Yandy sat with it for days. She wasn't hurt in the way people expected. She was tired of being discussed without being present, tired of narratives being formed around her silence. Emotions ran high as she debated whether to finally speak her truth. Tasha claimed Yandy drafted one final message. Not to Rasheeda, but to herself. A reminder that closure doesn't always come from conversations. Sometimes it comes from acceptance. That message, Tasha said, was the turning point. Yandy stopped waiting for accountability and started moving forward with intention. Fans were shocked when Tasha revealed that around this time, Rasheeda allegedly attempted another indirect olive branch. Not an apology, not a conversation, but a public compliment during an interview. Something vague about respecting strong women and wishing everyone well. Emotions ran high because many saw it as performative. Others saw it as growth. The divide only widened. Tasha broke down why that moment mattered. She said real reconciliation doesn't happen on stages or in interviews. It happens in uncomfortable private conversations. And by avoiding those, Rasheeda was choosing image over healing. Fans were shocked because that critique resonated far beyond this situation. It felt like a mirror held up to the entire industry. The narrative took another turn when Tasha claimed Yandy was advised by people close to her to finally speak publicly. To clear her name, to set the record straight. But Yandy refused. According to Tasha, she said she didn't want to become someone who needs public validation to feel right. That decision, Tasha said, was powerful but costly. Because silence leaves room for others to fill in the blanks. As time passed, the story didn't explode, it simmered. Emotions ran high in private conversations while the public moved on to the next headline. Rasheeda continued her appearances, smiling, working, thriving on the surface. Yandy did the same, but something fundamental had shifted. Trust was no longer assumed. Loyalty was no longer guaranteed. Tasha claimed that shift eventually caught up with Rasheeda in subtle ways. Not cancellations, not scandals, but hesitation. People thought twice before confiding. Alliances stayed surface level. Fans were shocked because this wasn't the dramatic downfall people expect, but a quiet consequence that lingers. One of the most revealing moments, according to Tasha, came when someone asked Rasheeda directly if she regretted how things played out. Tasha said Rasheeda paused before answering, choosing her words carefully. She said she regretted how it was perceived, not how it was handled. That distinction mattered. Emotions ran high because it confirmed what many suspected. The priority was perception, not impact. When Yandy heard about that response, Tasha said she finally felt at peace. Not because she felt vindicated, but because it confirmed she hadn't imagined the imbalance. The family was left divided emotionally, but Yandy no longer felt responsible for fixing it. Tasha reflected on how fans reacted to that realization. Many felt betrayed on Yandy's behalf. Others doubled down on defending Rasheeda. The comment sections became battlegrounds of interpretation. Emotions ran high as people projected their own experiences onto the situation, seeing friends who disappeared when things got hard. Tasha said that's why this story resonated so deeply. It wasn't just about two women in the spotlight. It was about conditional loyalty, about the cost of silence, about choosing self-preservation over connection. Fans were shocked because it felt uncomfortably familiar. Toward the end of this chapter, Tasha revealed that Yandy finally deleted the unsent message. Not out of fear, but out of release. She didn't need Rasheeda to understand anymore. She understood herself. And that clarity, Tasha said, was the real resolution, even if it didn't come with an apology or reconciliation. Rasheeda, on the other hand, continued forward unchanged on the surface, but subtly altered underneath. Tasha said she became more guarded, more selective, more aware that people were watching her moves differently now. Not waiting for her to fail, but waiting to see if she would ever choose vulnerability over control. Emotions ran high as Tasha closed out this portion of the story by saying not every fallout ends with a villain and a victim. Sometimes it ends with two people walking separate paths, carrying different lessons. One learns the cost of trusting too deeply. The other learns the cost of protecting yourself too well. And just when it seemed like the story had reached its natural end, Tasha hinted at something else entirely. She said there's a moment coming, a crossroads where public pressure and private truth will collide again. Not because anyone wants drama, but because unresolved stories have a way of resurfacing. And when they do, the question won't be who was right, but who was real. That crossroads, Tasha said, came faster than anyone expected. It wasn't planned, it wasn't announced, and it didn't come wrapped in a scandal. It came through pressure. Quiet pressure. The kind that builds when too many people have unanswered questions and too many moments don't line up anymore. Emotions ran high behind the scenes as people who once stayed neutral began pushing for clarity, not publicly, but privately, where it actually matters. Tasha claimed Rasheeda started feeling that weight. Not from fans, but from peers. Subtle things shifted. Conversations paused when she walked into rooms. Jokes didn't land the same. People listened, but they didn't open up. And for someone who built her power on being liked, respected, and trusted, that change hit deeper than any public drag ever could. According to Tasha, Rasheeda tried to rationalize it at first. She told herself she was imagining things. That people were just busy. That nothing had really changed. But when patterns repeat, denial gets harder. Emotions ran high as she reportedly started replaying old moments, wondering which choices planted the seeds for this distance. Yandy, meanwhile, stayed out of it. Tasha emphasized that Yandy wasn't celebrating this shift, wasn't feeding into it, wasn't whispering in corners. She was focused elsewhere, building, healing, moving forward. Fans were shocked because restraint like that is rare in a space that rewards reaction. But Tasha said Yandy had learned that peace is louder than explanation. Then came another unexpected turn. Tasha claimed a producer-level conversation happened, one that forced everything closer to the surface. Not about drama, but about trust. About who people feel safe aligning with long-term. And in that conversation, Yandy's name came up as someone who stayed consistent even when hurt. Rasheeda's name came up too, but differently. Carefully. With qualifiers. Emotions ran high because that's when Rasheeda allegedly realized this wasn't about one situation anymore. It was about reputation. Not the polished public one, but the private one. The one that determines who gets real access and who gets surface-level courtesy. Tasha said that realization shook her. Fans were shocked when Tasha claimed Rasheeda briefly considered reaching out to Yandy directly one last time. Not to defend herself, not to control the narrative, but to clear the air. Tasha said the message was typed, reread, and never sent. Fear crept in. Fear of rejection. Fear of vulnerability. Fear of hearing something she couldn't undo. Instead, Rasheeda allegedly chose familiarity. More positivity. More forward motion. More distance from anything that felt emotionally risky. Emotions ran high because that choice confirmed the very criticism people had been quietly making. Avoidance over accountability. Control over connection. Tasha didn't paint Yandy as perfect either. She acknowledged that Yandy's silence allowed assumptions to grow. That not speaking your truth can protect your peace, but it can also cost you your voice in the narrative. Fans were shocked by that honesty. Tasha said both women lost something in this fallout, just in different ways. As time went on, the story faded from headlines but not from memory. The family was left divided in subtle, lasting ways. Not dramatic splits, but changed dynamics. People chose sides through proximity, through who they called first, through who they trusted with real information. Emotions ran high beneath the surface, even when everything looked calm. Tasha claimed the final shift came when Rasheeda was asked, point blank, in a closed setting, what loyalty meant to her now. Not as a brand, not as a soundbite, but as a value. She reportedly answered that loyalty starts at home and everything else is conditional. That answer landed heavy. Fans were shocked when Tasha shared that, because it reframed everything retroactively. For Yandy, that statement brought closure. According to Tasha, she finally understood that the friendship wasn't broken by circumstance but by philosophy. They simply didn't value the same things the same way. And once that truth settled in, the hurt lost its power. Emotions ran high as Tasha reflected on how quietly devastating that realization can be. When there's no big betrayal moment, no explosive argument, just the slow understanding that someone you trusted was never going to show up the way you needed them to. Fans were shocked because that kind of loss feels personal to anyone who's experienced it. Tasha said Rasheeda continues to move forward successfully, but differently now. More guarded, more intentional, less accessible. She hasn't fallen, but she has changed. And people around her have changed too, adjusting their expectations accordingly. Yandy, on the other hand, rebuilt selectively. Smaller circle, deeper trust, clearer boundaries. Tasha said she stopped explaining herself and started honoring her instincts again. That growth didn't come with applause, but it came with peace. In the end, Tasha made it clear this wasn't about choosing sides. It was about recognizing patterns. About understanding how power, fear, and image shape behavior. Emotions ran high because the story held up a mirror not just to celebrities but to everyday relationships. And as the dust settled, one truth remained unresolved. Not who was right or wrong, but whether Rasheeda would ever choose vulnerability over control if faced with the same situation again. Tasha said that answer hasn't come yet. Because some lessons don't announce themselves. They show up quietly, over time, in who stays, who leaves, and who never looks at you the same again. Time passed, but the story never really slept. It just learned how to sit quietly. According to Tasha, what happened next wasn't loud enough for headlines but heavy enough to change trajectories. The kind of shift you only notice when you look back and realize how much ground has moved under your feet. Emotions ran high because even silence has momentum, and once it starts rolling, it takes things with it. Tasha claimed Rasheeda began tightening her circle even more. Fewer phone calls, shorter conversations, more assistants, fewer friends. She wasn't bitter, just careful. Every interaction became measured, every word filtered. Fans were shocked when they noticed how guarded she seemed compared to before. Not cold, but distant in a way that felt intentional. Tasha said that's what happens when someone mistakes control for safety long enough that it becomes habit. Behind the scenes, people started adjusting how they approached her. Not confrontational, not hostile, just cautious. Tasha said the energy was polite but thin. Smiles without substance. Agreements without warmth. The family was left divided emotionally, with some still loyal and others slowly stepping back without announcements. Emotions ran high because no one wanted to admit the dynamic had changed, but everyone felt it. Yandy, on the other hand, leaned into depth over breadth. Tasha said she stopped chasing clarity from people who weren't offering it. She poured into work, into relationships that didn't require her to shrink or explain. Fans were shocked because the glow-up wasn't flashy, it was grounded. The kind of growth that doesn't need validation. Tasha revealed that months later, an opportunity arose that forced both women into the same extended space again. Not face-to-face, but adjacent. Shared circles, overlapping rooms, and in those moments, the contrast became clear. Rasheeda moved with confidence but restraint. Yandy moved with ease. Neither acknowledged the other publicly, but the absence of acknowledgement spoke volumes. Emotions ran high as observers picked up on it. The pauses, the missed eye contact, the conversations that almost happened but didn't. Fans were shocked because unresolved tension has a way of making itself known even when everyone is pretending it's not there. Tasha said Rasheeda noticed that Yandy didn't flinch, didn't stiffen, didn't perform. She was simply present. That presence, according to Tasha, was unsettling. Because it suggested closure had happened without Rasheeda being part of it. And that realization can sting more than confrontation. Another twist came when someone close to Rasheeda allegedly asked her if she ever felt misunderstood. Tasha said Rasheeda answered honestly. She said people expect women to sacrifice themselves for loyalty and punish them when they don't. Emotions ran high because that statement wasn't wrong, but it wasn't complete either. Tasha argued that protecting yourself doesn't require disappearing on people you promised to stand by. Fans were shocked when Tasha said that comment circled back to Yandy. Not as gossip, but as reflection. Yandy reportedly understood Rasheeda's fear better after hearing it, but understanding didn't equal agreement. She could empathize with the fear and still hold firm on the hurt. Tasha emphasized that this is where the story deepened. It stopped being about blame and became about boundaries. Rasheeda's boundary was image and control. Yandy's boundary became access and trust. Neither was wrong, but they were incompatible. Emotions ran high because incompatibility hurts most when it shows up late. As time went on, the industry adjusted. New alliances formed, old ones faded. Nothing dramatic, just evolution. Tasha said Rasheeda remained respected but not assumed safe. Yandy remained trusted but not loud. Fans were shocked by how quietly reputations can shift without anyone announcing it. There was one final moment Tasha shared that crystallized everything. She said someone asked Yandy if she would ever clear the air publicly. Yandy reportedly smiled and said some stories don't need an audience to be finished. That answer hit hard. Emotions ran high because it suggested peace without performance. Tasha contrasted that with Rasheeda, who continued to speak in generalities about growth and boundaries. Not dishonest, but incomplete. Fans were shocked because sometimes what you don't say defines you more than what you do. The family was left divided in memory now, not in conflict. People remembered things differently. Some remembered Rasheeda as strategic and smart. Others remembered her as distant when it mattered. Some remembered Yandy as emotional. Others remembered her as restrained. Time didn't erase the story, it just softened the edges. Tasha reflected on why this story lingered. Because it mirrored real life. Friendships that don't end with fights but with space. Promises that aren't broken loudly, just quietly forgotten. Emotions ran high because that kind of ending doesn't give you closure on a silver platter. You have to make it yourself. In the final stretch of her commentary, Tasha said she doesn't believe either woman is evil. She believes fear makes people choose differently. Rasheeda chose protection. Yandy chose honesty with herself. Fans were shocked because that framing removed the villain narrative and replaced it with something more uncomfortable. Nuance. And that's why the question still hangs. Not will they reconcile, but would they choose differently if given the same moment again? Tasha said Yandy already has her answer. Rasheeda's answer is still forming. Because control feels safe until it costs you connection. And silence feels peaceful until it costs you understanding. In this story, both women paid a price. Just not the same one. And as the industry keeps moving, as new dramas replace old ones, this situation remains a quiet reference point. A reminder whispered in rooms when loyalty comes up. A cautionary tale about how you handle people when they're vulnerable. Emotions ran high as Tasha closed this chapter by saying some reputations aren't ruined by scandals. They're reshaped by choices. Small ones. Quiet ones. The kind you think no one notices until everyone does. And with that, the story doesn't explode into an ending. It settles. Unresolved, but understood. Because sometimes the most dramatic fallout isn't the one that goes viral, but the one that changes how people feel when your name is mentioned after the room goes quiet. Even after all that time, the ripple effects kept showing up in unexpected ways. Tasha said the story became one of those quiet reference points people didn't name directly but always felt. Someone would mention loyalty in a room, and the energy would shift just a little. Someone would talk about standing 10 toes down, and there'd be a pause. Emotions ran high because everyone knew what example was floating in the air without being spoken. According to Tasha, Rasheeda started leaning harder into self-definition. She spoke more about boundaries, about protecting peace, about not owing explanations. On the surface, it sounded empowering, and for some people, it was. But for others, it felt like armor layered on top of armor. Fans were shocked at how often strength was mentioned without vulnerability ever entering the conversation. Yandy, meanwhile, became more selective with her words. When she spoke, it was measured. When she stayed silent, it was intentional. Tasha said people underestimated how much power that kind of silence holds. Not passive silence. Chosen silence. Emotions ran high because silence like that forces others to sit with their own interpretations. Another subtle twist came when a younger woman in the same space asked Yandy for advice about navigating friendships in the industry. Tasha said Yandy didn't name names. She didn't tell horror stories. She simply said watch how people act when it costs them something to stand with you. Fans were shocked by how simple and heavy that advice was. That quote traveled, not publicly, but privately. People repeated it, thought about it, applied it, and slowly, the narrative solidified without Yandy ever having to explain herself. Emotions ran high because truth doesn't always need amplification. Sometimes it just needs consistency. Tasha claimed Rasheeda heard about that advice eventually. Not as shade, but as wisdom. And for a moment, it reportedly made her pause. Not defensively, but reflectively. She asked herself whether she would make the same choice again if the cost were different. Tasha said that question lingered longer than any drag ever could. Fans were shocked when Tasha admitted she doesn't think Rasheeda is incapable of loyalty. She thinks Rasheeda is afraid of risk. Afraid of being collateral. Afraid of losing control of a narrative she worked too hard to build. Emotions ran high because fear is harder to condemn than malice. As time continued, the industry rewarded both women differently. Rasheeda's success stayed steady, predictable, polished. Yandy's path felt quieter but deeper. Fewer loud wins, more meaningful ones. Tasha said that contrast spoke louder than numbers or headlines. The family was left divided in philosophy now. Some people admired Rasheeda's discipline and self-preservation. Others admired Yandy's emotional integrity. Conversations about them became less about drama and more about values. Emotions ran high because values force people to confront their own choices. Tasha shared that there was one moment where both women were praised in the same breath by the same person, but for completely different reasons. Rasheeda was praised for her longevity. Yandy was praised for her consistency. Fans were shocked because those compliments revealed what each woman had ultimately become known for. Another quiet moment sealed things emotionally. Tasha said Yandy was asked if she missed the friendship. She didn't hesitate. She said she missed who she thought the friendship was, not who it turned out to be. Emotions ran high because that distinction hit home for a lot of people watching. Rasheeda, on the other side, was asked something similar in a different setting. Tasha said she answered by saying she doesn't dwell on the past. That answer wasn't wrong, but it wasn't revealing either. Fans were shocked by how much was left unsaid. Over time, the lack of closure became its own kind of closure. No apology. No reconciliation. No final showdown. Just distance that settled into permanence. Emotions ran high because endings without punctuation feel unfinished, even when they're final. Tasha reflected that this is why the story stayed with people. Because most real-life fallouts don't end with speeches or tears. They end with recalibration. You move differently. You trust differently. You remember differently. She said Rasheeda learned how to protect herself more efficiently. Yandy learned how to trust herself more deeply. Neither lesson came cheap. Fans were shocked because growth is often romanticized, but this growth came with loss. In the later stages, people stopped asking if they would ever reconnect. The question shifted to whether they even should. Emotions ran high because sometimes reconnection isn't healing, it's reopening. Tasha made it clear she doesn't believe this story is meant to teach people who to side with. It's meant to teach people what to watch. How patterns reveal themselves. How silence can speak. How choices made under pressure echo long after the moment passes. As the years move forward, new names enter the space, new dramas take center stage. But this situation lingers like a low hum. Not loud enough to dominate, but constant enough to remember. Fans were shocked at how something so quiet could be so influential. In the end, Tasha said the most telling thing isn't what either woman says now. It's how others respond to them. Who confides? Who hesitates? Who leans in? Who keeps it surface? Emotions ran high because reputation isn't what you say about yourself. It's what people assume when you're not in the room. And so the story rests there. Not explosive, not resolved, but understood in a way that doesn't need words anymore. Because sometimes the loudest truth is the one everyone quietly agrees on but no one needs to say out loud. So now it's on you. After hearing all of this, after sitting with every quiet move, every missed moment, every calculated silence, you have to ask yourself one question. Who was really real in this situation? Because this wasn't about screaming matches or viral clapbacks. This was about choices made when nobody was watching. And those are the choices that stick. Fans are still shocked, emotions are still high, and the family was left divided not just in this story, but in how people see loyalty altogether. Some of you might feel Rasheeda did what she had to do to protect her peace. Others might feel Yandy deserved more than silence and distance. There's no easy answer, and that's exactly why this conversation keeps coming back. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think staying neutral is smart, or is it just another form of betrayal? Do you believe loyalty should have limits, or should it show up strongest when things get uncomfortable? And most importantly, if you were in that position, would you choose protection or connection? Drop your thoughts in the comments because this is one of those stories where perspective matters. Read what other people are saying, challenge your own takes, and let's really talk about it. Because this isn't just celebrity drama, it's real-life lessons playing out on a public stage. And if you're rocking with this kind of deep, unfiltered breakdown, make sure you hit that like button. It helps the channel more than you know. Subscribe if you haven't already, because you already know we don't skip the uncomfortable parts over here. And turn on your notifications so you don't miss what comes next, because stories like this always have layers that resurface when you least expect it. This conversation isn't over. It's just paused until the next move is made. And trust me, when it is, you'll want to be right here.